Landed in our valley. 1920, May 7th. So we're just a few days past its anniversary. But May 7th, 1920, a guy by the name of Randall Henderson and Jake Beckley landed in a small plane just south of downtown Las Vegas, kind of where we see the Sahara is now. There was a rough dirt runway. They could land there, and they landed there just to do what they call barn flying, so demonstration flights to try to produce interest in aviation. After World War II or World War I, we had a surplus of airplanes and a surplus of pilots. So across the United States, you started seeing all these barnstormers, these demonstration flights, to try to get people interested in aviation and show this is a safe thing. We can do this. We can fly through the air. So Randall Henderson landed, and not Henderson's name after. He was from flight, and it was a big spectacle. And this is actually the plane that landed. You can see it looks like a little different terrain, but that was still an area of Las Vegas that was kind of being used. This is Randall Henderson himself. You can see some of the kids gathering around. It gathered a huge crowd. And for $10, you could get in the airplane and it would fly you around the city. An interesting connection to the Clark County Museum, Jake Beckley is William Beckley's brother. And so when Jake Beckley went up on that plane, he took a doll with him. And he had planned to fly that plane over 4th Street, where the Beckley house was, and drop that doll for his 3-year-old niece. And he did. And we actually have the clothes. The doll didn't survive very well. I guess kids kind of, it was a little rag doll, and the kids kind of ended up carrying and ripping the doll. But the clothes of the doll survived. So we actually have that in our collection. It's an important piece. Do you imagine being a 3-year-old standing outside, and a plane which you've never seen in your entire life flies over, and a doll comes down from your uncle? Of course, they gathered the doll, they went out, and they actually got to see the plane land and got to possibly even ride in it with their uncle. So that was the first flight. From that point forward, Anderson Field was where they had landed. Anderson Field changed names to Rockwell Field because the Rockwells bought it and they decided to name it after them. And that kind of was the main hub for aviation. No commercial flights, no airmail were coming through. It was just these barnstormers doing these demonstration flights trying to get interest in the aviation field. Until 1926. On April 17, 1926, Western Airmail Express landed in Las Vegas from Los Angeles with mail. They got the contract to run the route from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. So what they did is they had 2 planes take off, one in Los Angeles, one in Salt Lake City, and land in Las Vegas. Of course, the Los Angeles flight arrived first. It was a guy by the name of Murray Graham, and he got off, and these are some of the photographs they got of weighing the mail. This was an important way to get our news and our information out to the rest of the United States quickly. And they did, of course, some publicity photos as well. The Pony Express going to, now we're using airplanes, so going from horse moving the mail to airplanes. And this was really important because the railroads started to have some strikes and things were stopping along the way. So if we have another route to transport mail, it's going to be great. So the federal government actually subsidized this a lot, put a lot of money into these companies. This is why you see airmail start before passenger mail. Now Western Air Express is really smart. They decide, well, we have a little extra place in this plane. 5 weeks later, they strapped in 2 chairs and they allowed passengers to fly from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to Salt Lake, or vice versa. Now, if there was more mail, the mail made them more money, so the passengers would have to be basically put on standby until the next mail plane came. If you can imagine sitting in the back of this plane in a chair that's just kind of, they gave you a parachute to put on, and you had airmail sitting in your lap and around you. Probably wasn't the best flight, but a lot of businessmen used this way to transport themselves from one place to the next. Some high-name actresses actually use this, and actors. In fact, there's a story of Jimmy James was one of the ones that flew. Him and Murray stopped on an emergency stop just so that they could both meet the star that was in Jimmy's plane. Take a few pictures and then move along. So airmail really was the important part. This is actually the day that the first airmail plane landed. You can see a large crowd gathered in Rockwell Field at that time. And it was important, but Western Air Express ran into a lot of different problems. Of course, 1930s, problems were everywhere, right? Subsidies were slowing down from the federal government. They weren't making as much. Some regulations came down too, which kind of threatened their expansion. So they actually had to downsize, and they had to join another airline, and it all formed TWA. Luckily, Western Air Express was able to still run their little sub-company here in Las Vegas, airmail, while TWA took care of more of the national expansion. Western Express did okay until about the 1940s. Then they really started to grow again, and we saw Western Airlines form Western Express, which grew and grew until you got, passenger jets with Western, and airmail dropped off because the subsidies dropped off. That's not where the money is. That's not where they're going to put their resources. Now, kind of stopped in the 1930s. That's no good. Boulder City, right? That's when the city here started to pop up, and with the building of Hoover Dam. And Boulder Field, where we are today, actually started in 1933. Anybody know what Boulder Field is named after? Mr. Bullock, yes! Which if you search newspapers, there's a lot of Bullocks in the area at the time. But Noel Bullock was the one who decided Boulder City needs an airport. I can build that airport. So early in the summer of 1933, he started flying in a dirt runway here, where we are today. In fact, there's news reports of first flight to land in Boulder City in July, and then the second one was in July. And finally, come November, Bullock has his airport ready to open. And it's going to be for private jets, it's going to be for flight instructions, and a few charter jets, or planes. So he opens it in November, but doesn't have a big ceremony. He waits till December. So December 10th, they have their big airport opening ceremony, and they have displays, they have parachuters. It was a huge event. 3,000 people came out, blocking the whole highway, to see all the spectacles at the airport. And everyone assumed this was going to be a huge success. Wasn't quite as successful as Bullock had hoped. Shortly thereafter, he let his lease lapse. The federal government took over the airport and let basically anybody land for free, land here, take off from here. Come a little bit later, let me get the year right because I'm blanking on it, 1936, a millionaire came in. His name is Roxy Ruxtell. Anybody hear the Ruxtell axle? Model T's? He invented the axle that went into most Model Ts, became a millionaire, decided to bring his money to Southern Nevada. And he opened a small tour company called Grand Canyon Airlines. Eventually, he partnered, and I'm going to get this name wrong, so I'm sorry. He partnered with Jim Webb, and they opened up the Grand Canyon Boulder Dam Tours Incorporated. Now, this wasn't just flights. This was flights over the Grand Canyon. This was tours of the Grand Canyon, tours of Lake Mead, the Boulder Dam site. It was tours of every kind. They saw Boulder City as this is going to be the tourist hub of Southern Nevada. So he pumped all his money into this. In fact, in 1937, he built a hangar for Grand Canyon Airways. And he employed a lot of people through the city. Now, in 1938, he wanted to expand even more. Well, remember that company, TWA? So even though they were working with Western Express, they were not allowed to deliver mail to Las Vegas. Mail was where the money was. So how can we get money out of delivering things to Las Vegas? Well, federal government had a law that you could not, two companies couldn't deliver mail to the same airport, but you could deliver mail a certain distance away from that airport, which Boulder City was in. So why don't we try to get the mail contract to move mail to Boulder City, and then we can also run passengers. Unfortunately, they did not get the contract. The federal government said, no, we're not going to give you the mail. But they said, hey, this is a tourist destination of the state. Let's start running commercial flights out of here. So TWA and Grand Canyon Airlines actually formed an agreement that TWA would fly all of their passenger flights through here, their connecting flights. They had a major flight that went from San Francisco to Newark, and it would stop here in Boulder City. And they were also going, of course, from here to San Francisco. And they started selling tickets. But one problem kind of arose. The airport wasn't quite big enough. So instead of TWA putting money into it, guess who put money into it? Roxy Ruxell. He said, I'll put money in. This is going to be a great venture. Put $50,000 into improvements here. They built a brand new terminal. They expanded the runway. Also, TWA could use this to its best capabilities. So on the surface, they're bringing in tourists, right? And then go on his tours of the dam site, go to Lake Mead, go to the Grand Canyon. He's going to sell all these tickets, and it looked like it was a really good financial plan. But under the surface, it was not. Ruxell was actually losing money. He was not making money. He grew a little too fast. And that was some of his financial demise, but also he ran into regulation issues with federal government and local governments as well. So he had a lot of those issues that took up a lot of his money, and his company started to really decline. And then comes World War II. World War II was their tour of the dam. You can go tour the dam during World War II. Were you gonna go fly your tour airplane? No, civil aviation kind of came to a stop as well. So the company actually started to suffer and started to slowly be piecemealed out. By 1962, the company completely had disbanded the Grand Canyon Boulder Dam. Now you'll still see Grand Canyon Airways. That was bought by another company. They still run tours to the Grand Canyon today, but that is a separate company that started. Now the field here, going into the 1940s, the Navy came in, built a hangar. Now I've been trying to figure out, is this the hangar that Grand Canyon Airways built, or is the Navy built? I have not been able to find it out yet. But the Navy built a hangar, and military were flying in here during World War II. After the military left, it kind of got condemned. But prior to it being condemned, we had another billionaire come in here. And we hear of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes actually came and used Bullock Field as his home base while he was testing his Swarovski. I've been totally missing the picture, sorry. So there's the hangar there that they built. The big grand opening for TWA was a big fair fan as well. We had a lot of people come out. Of course, you always have to have that horse in there, towards west. But you can see the great terminal they built for TWA. And then you have Howard Hughes and his Swarovski S-43 that he tested out here. This was an amphibious plane that he had in California, and he was building for the military, but they needed tests done before they could approve it. And they had the test scheduled in California, and out of the blue, as Howard Hughes would do, the plane disappeared. Here. He wanted to do tests away from the oversight of any paparazzi or media or anything that was going to oversee it. So we thought, Southern Nevada's great, plus I can go to Las Vegas and enjoy the nightlife with one of his various women that he was courting at that time. So he came here, this was his home base. He'd fly out of the airport, land in Lake Mead, did it hundreds of times, no problem whatsoever. So finally, the test date comes, and he agrees, I'll bring the plane back to California where you guys can test the land operations, but to test its ability to land on water, I want to use Lake Mead, because that's what I've been practicing. So they said, okay. passed all the way in Testing, California, came out here, took off, everything was going great. Went to go land on the lake, and unfortunately, did not land well. It was going okay for first, and then it started tilting, and the whole plane crashed until it made, I believe, one person was dead instantly, 2 others were critically injured. They were rescued, and eventually they did end up getting the plane out of Lake Mead, and this is the wreckage you can see, so pretty horrendous. Hughes himself was just minorly injured, and he just continued on. Moved on from Boulder City, and of course did most of his testing of his other planes in California. Now we're going to a little more Las Vegas history. These people here, anybody hear of David Crockett? This is his descendant. This is George Crockett and his wife Peg Crockett. And they came into Las Vegas in 1942, and he decided there wasn't really a good place for private and charter planes to land. All the commercial business at that point was going to where we called Nellis Air Force Base at this time. At that point was McCarran Field, and it was military and commercial aviation landing there. So George Crockett said, I have this great opportunity to invest. I have my own airline. I can fly out of there, and I can do private flights. So he bought up all the land in the south of downtown Las Vegas, and he paved, or he plowed 3 runways for planes to land.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Come along all the way 5 years later, 1948, we have a problem with our aviation. It's all flying into McCarran Field, military and commercial. The Air Force is wanting to start. They can't have commercial passenger planes landing right next to Air Force planes. So the commercial planes are going to get kicked out of what was McCarran Field. So the county had a problem. The county decided to step in. We'll take over, but we need the field. Well, Alamo Airfield is kind of right there on the bottom of Route 91. Good location, it's already developed. So they negotiated with George Crockett and actually took over his land leases and purchased what we know now as Harry Reid International Airport. At that point became the second McCarran Airfield. And they put up a makeshift air tower, so FAA would approve it. Sorry. And they ran a commercial airfare out of this little terminal that George Crockett had started. So this is what we know now as Harry Reid, or formerly McCarran International Airport. You've got downtown Las Vegas here in the distance. This is Las Vegas Boulevard, and this is Paradise. So the terminal at that point is right off of Las Vegas Boulevard. Perfect place for it. Our industry starts increasing for tourism in Las Vegas because the airport brings all these people right to where we're starting to build some of these resorts, like the Hacienda, that then offer tours to the Boulder Dam. So everything was kind of growing and increasing, and they brought the McCarran sign. This sign actually was at the site where Nellis is now. They brought pillars all the way down there. Everyone finds pictures of that. We want pictures of that. We have no pictures of it. But they brought it down, and this is actually the oldest neon sign in the city. It is still there off of Las Vegas Boulevard, where you go to Signature, to the helicopters, and you all fly to the Grand Canyon over Lake Mead. That sign is still there. 1950s, you can see the city is also growing. Sorry, these are really large photos, so it takes a little sometimes. So you can see the city's growing. This is Las Vegas Boulevard here. This is the air terminal. And you can start to see that Route 91 is starting to get all these buildings popping up. Casinos are starting to pop up, and we're growing. Another huge aviation feat in the 1950s is in 1958 in December, 2 men took off. A guy named by the name of Jim Cook and John Cook, Robert Ten, took off in this plane here. It was a little Cessna. Took everything out of the inside. They had a bed, they had a portable toilet seat, because they planned to break the world record for the longest flights on land. And they achieved it. It still stands today. They were in that little tiny airplane for 54 days, 19 hours, and 20 minutes approximately. These were not small men. These were 6-foot men in this airplane. They couldn't stand. abandoned it. They had a mattress, a makeshift mattress in there. And this is a support vehicle. This is actually George and Peg Crockett. They still were involved with these at the airport, and that was one of their support vehicles. To fuel, they had a big truck from Cashman Equipment that would drive, and they would stick it, was full of the gasoline, pump it up. Of course, as you're going, the plane gets heavier, the truck gets lighter, the truck wants to go faster, the plane wants to go slower. So they actually had someone laying down looking at the plane, pressing the accelerators to match the speed of that plane. To prove that they broke the record, the sheriff had to go out in the car and actually paint the tire as it's flying so that they could see that that paint was still there right before they landed. Now, they ended up wanting to go for 70 days. They did not get 70 days because they started to have some major mechanical breakdowns. But today, that record still is the world record. It was a long enough flight to go around the world 6 times. An amazing feat. Now, personally, I don't want to break that record. I don't want to be in a plane that long with anybody. And I think that's partially why it hasn't been broken, but it has been tried. So that's 1958. We actually have this plane in our collection. It's the only plane we have in our aviation collection that's full-size plane. And it hangs up above baggage claim. So the next time you're flying in and out of Las Vegas, your baggage claim looks straight up. That's where our plane is. So it greets every visitor that comes in. Now 1960s starts to grow, so they decided we need a new terminal. That little tiny terminal just wasn't enough. But there wasn't space on the Las Vegas Boulevard to build a big enough terminal, parking lot, and facilities. So they were going to have to move over to Paradise. One problem with that, the resorts on Las Vegas Boulevard don't want that. They want people to get in a taxi cab, go straight down Las Vegas Boulevard and go to their resorts, not to go to downtown off of Paradise. So they made an agreement, and they decided that all taxi cabs would be routed down what road we know now as Tropicana. They would all go to the Strip. This brought all those tourists to the Strip rather than downtown Las Vegas. And then they finally built their new terminal. This is actually the terminal that is Terminal 1 now, still today. It's a clamshell-shaped building that was built to kind of mimic a terminal that's at JFK. It's still there. It's built around, so you can't see it as gloriously as it used to be. But it is still there. That's kind of where the A and B gates are. But even with that building, you can see they've added a lot more terminal space. They've got all their planes can land there. That still was not enough after deregulation. Does anybody know what deregulation was? This is a Nevada proposed bill. So Senator Howard W. Cannon was our senator. He went to Congress and said, hey, we need to deregulate airlines. It's not fair. We are restricting airlines on where they can fly, what their prices are, what routes they can do. Some of these airlines were applying to come to airports like Las Vegas and waiting 8 years just to hear no. So the aviation industry wasn't increasing as it should have been. So our senator went and said, hey, we need to deregulate. So in 1978, he proposed the bill and it was signed by Jimmy Carter into action. This was a huge success for us. With this regulation, we went from having 5 airlines flying in here to 17 very shortly. So you start to see some of our really large numbers of passengers coming in. So 1973, before regulation, we had 5 million passengers coming in a year. By 1980, we had 10 million. So in less than 10 years, we doubled how many passengers were coming in. And this all had to do with, we can have more airlines, we can have different routes, people are now being able to flood in. And so, in his honor, the county decided in 1991 to honor Howard W. Cannon and name the Aviation Museum after him. So this is him standing in our museum with his wife before he passed. And now his name will live on forever through the Aviation Museum. Of course, we had continued growth. So this is McCarran's baggage claim area. We had huge jets landing, and parking became a super major issue at McCarran because you're growing so rapidly. Other systems were completely overrun. The water system was at 105% of its capacity. The sewer system was at 115% of its capacity. one problem you don't want to have in an airport is water and sewage. So they decided to launch the plan. It's called McCarran 2000. And this basically touched every part of the airport in expanding it and developing it. The runways became stronger, longer, so that we could handle these big jets. New terminals were built. This was a massive project that went from 1989 all the way until the early 2000s with the finishing of the D gates. So we added tons of terminals, tons of gates for everyone to come in. And of course, we had to do it our own style. So this is the grand opening of the baggage claim area that we have nowadays we're still using. Of course, we had to have Siegfried and Roy and the Tigers come out of that. You'll never see that again. Growth has continued though. With the development after McCarran 2000, we had the growth of these big mega resorts, right? So before we had these hotels and casinos popping up, they weren't mega resorts. They had a few hundred rooms. But then you get the Luxor, the Mirage, and all these mega resorts which are having thousands of rooms. Now the demand's growing even more. But would we have this demand if we didn't have aviation coming in? No. So it was actually a symbiotic relationship. As the airport grew and its capacity grew, so did the mega resorts, and they've gone up together until we got to this year, last year, where they had 57.6 million passengers come through our airport, which is more than they ever imagined possible. Now, did we have some stumbling stones? We absolutely did. Most of us remember September 11th, 2001, 2 planes flew into the Trade Center building, mass casualties, and a change completely to our aviation system, right? Who remembers going to the airport and not having to go through security, walking on the tarmac and getting on a plane? That's how it used to be. 9/11 completely changed that. And our airport, McCarran at the time, did a fabulous job of supporting that. So here is 9/11, this is our tarmac, this is after they grounded all the planes. All the planes couldn't fit at all the different various airports that they had planned on landing. So we had planes that had never landed here before landing. Of course, because of security, none of them were actually at the gate. They unloaded passengers and then had to push away from the gate. This was the only time that McCarran had ever locked its doors. They had to get everyone out of the airport and actually physically lock the doors. Imagine something to run that never locked the door and now you have to lock the door. And so we talk about it being very eerie because of course we have casinos in our airport. The airport doesn't run those. Gaming control oversees those. Gaming control's not there, so those things are also going on. They said it was an empty airport and they never wanted to hear Wheel of Fortune again. All I heard. But they emptied it out and they did a phenomenal job, so much so that we were the first airport to reopen 2 days later after 9/11. Operations began at McCarran again, trying to get all these passengers home. Of course, they initiated new security checkpoints, so they had 6 TSA gates that people had to go through and get screened. Of course, realized 6 was not going to be enough. They were going to need a lot more, and they were going to need to refine how they did that. They did it as they go. And they've actually gotten, I guess, now they have a terminal where you can do a self-TSA check-in. We're one of the first places in the country to try that out and see how that goes, kind of like you check out at the grocery store. You can go and check in. We've seen some other changes. So this is December 2021 is when we officially changed the name to Harry Reid International. This actually came across in February where the County Board of Commissioners decided that the name McCarran wasn't suitable because of some of the bad actions he had done in the past. So they wanted to change the name, and Harry Reid International was the decided name.
Okay.
So we had a name change and we had a pandemic going on at the same time. Pictures of during COVID were ghost town images, and they really thought it was going to be 9/11 where we had a huge decrease in aviation transportation afterwards. But they didn't see that. Once we reopened and once we realized we could start traveling again, that airport just blew up again. It has about 5 million visitors a month shortly thereafter. But that's not all they're doing. They're also expanding. So just recently, they have decided that they have reached capacity. They cannot take any more passengers through McCarran or Harry Reid. So they are planning another airport, and this airport is going to be south down in the Ivanpah Valley. Probably heard about it for years. They've talked about putting an airport, Ivanpah Airport. But now they're going to call it the Southern Nevada Supplemental Airport. And they do have a lot of the land there has already been given to the Department of Aviation by BLM. And they're at the very, very beginning phases of doing environmental impact studies. Airport to go down there. This blue line here is they actually have land along Interstate 15 to hopefully have a Metrolink that would take you from there to Harry Reid in a short 30 minutes, so that they can keep going with our valley. So that was a brief history of our aviation history. Do you have any questions? Good. Thank you.
Historical Preservation Day in Boulder City, and we're here at the incredible